Hi, boys and girls. Now that you have worked on how to tell a story or tell a narrative, we are going to go ahead and move on to writing our narratives. So, before we begin, I'm just going to remind you what makes a narrative. A narrative has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Each of those can be one sentence. You want to make sure you're telling a seed story, and what I mean by that is think of a watermelon. A watermelon's really, really big, and there's a whole lot of stuff that if you were telling a watermelon story, you could tell about an entire school year, probably. But instead of doing that, you want to do a seed story where you're taking like one moment from the school year. Maybe it was the day that you got to do the Boosterthon run. That would be a seed story because it was one little part of a bigger thing, which was your whole year in first grade. Okay, you want to make sure you're using feeling words, and you need to tell who, what, where, and when. So you have to tell who was a part of the story, what was happening in it, where it was happening, and when the story was happening. Over here, I have an example of the steps that you need to take when you are writing a narrative. And I'm going to go into a little bit more deep. So you have to think, you have to picture, you have to draw, and then you have to write. So your first step, and you're going to do the first 3 steps today. Your first step is thinking. So this is where you're not sure what you're going to write about yet. You're not sure what your story is going to be about yet, but you are just thinking of an idea, thinking of times if you have to write about a fun day, thinking about things that you've done recently that have been fun. If you had to write about a time that you were sad, thinking about things lately when you've been upset, what have you been upset about? Step 1 is thinking. So you don't have to do any writing or drawing or anything for step 1. Step 1 just happens in your mind. After you have thought of your idea of what you're going to write about, you have to picture it in your head. This one is another step that's just in your mind. And you kind of have to plan it out in your head and figure out, what were you doing? Who were you with? Where were you? When did it happen? Ask yourself if you are thinking of a long amount of time that's more like a watermelon story, or if you are thinking of a short piece of time that's more like a seed story. All of this stuff is being done in your head also. So our first 2 steps, thinking of an idea and then picturing that idea and kind of trying to start to break it up into beginning, middle, and end, are all being done just in your brain. You don't have to do any writing for those steps. But it is important that you do them, because when you get to your next 2 steps, if you didn't think and picture, you're going to have a lot harder time organizing your ideas. If you thought about your idea and then you pictured it in your head and kind of planned it out in your head, it will be a lot easier to do the next 2 steps. Step 3 is you are going to draw. You are going to draw 3 separate pictures. You're going to draw one for what happened at the beginning, one for what happened in the middle, and one for what happened at the end. So I have an example here. And this person only went to step 3. There is no step 4 on here yet. They did not write yet. They just thought, pictured, and drew. So this is called the pet store. And I can't read it to you yet because they didn't do their final step yet. They didn't actually write their narrative. But I can use their pictures to kind of figure out what happened. And the beginning picture is just showing a pet store, and you can see some pets in the window. So I am thinking that they went to the pet store. That was probably what the beginning of their story was. Then in the middle, I see a bird and a cat and a fish. And it looks like there's another cat there. So maybe in the middle they were looking for a pet. And then at the end they drew a dog and a house and a bowl. So maybe at the end they chose to get a dog. and they drew a picture of the dog that they bought from the pet store. I'm not totally sure yet, but from those pictures, that's what I think that this story is probably about. Today, when you go on to Seesaw, you are going to use these first 3 steps to begin to plan out to write a narrative. Tomorrow, you are going to do the writing part. Today, you are just doing the first 3 steps, which is thinking of your idea, picturing it in your head, and kind of getting it organized, and then drawing what happened at the beginning, middle, and end. Remember, when you are drawing pictures, you guys are almost in 2nd grade now, you need to make sure you are doing good pictures. Pictures that have lots of colors, pictures that have lots of details. I don't want to see pictures that are only one color. I know my rule in my classroom is that you have to have 4 or more colors on every picture. And make sure you're not just drawing, see, this person didn't just draw a dog at the end. They drew a whole background. They drew the little doghouse and the bowl and all of that stuff. They didn't just draw a cat. They drew the cat on the little scratching post. They didn't just draw a fish. They drew the fish in the bowl and the water and the little pebbles at the bottom and the plant in there, okay? So make sure your pictures look like almost 2nd grade pictures. They're not just going to be scribbles all in one color. Go ahead and get logged on to Seesaw, and you can start your assignment for today. I can't wait to see what you have come up with to write your narrative about. Your thinking, your picturing, and your drawing.